66 million years ago, the Earth wakes up into a world that feels eternal. A planet thick with warmth and breath, where coastlines stretch farther inland and forests rise in green towers of conifers and ferns, where rivers braid across floodplains like veins, and the air carries the steady pulse of life that has ruled for ages. On open plains, herds move with a purpose older than memory, triceratops shoulder to shoulder, horns catching the morning light as they trample through damp undergrowth. Hadrosaurs calling across wide valleys in long, echoing notes that roll like distant thunder. Ankylosaurs lumbering in armored silence, their clubtails swinging like pendulums of bone, while smaller dinosaurs dart at the edges of safety-quick shadows. Cautious eyes, because in this world, survival is not a philosophy. It is physics. Above them, the sky belongs to wings that seem impossible. Enormous pterosaurs gliding on invisible highways of warm air, living sails that barely move yet travel miles with ease, and among them early birds experiment with flight, beating feathered wings through shafts of sunlight that cut the canopy like liquid gold. Beneath the surface, the oceans are not empty blue, but layered kingdoms, where schools shimmer like moving metal, where predators cut through water with teeth and speed, and in deeper darkness, ancient hunters patrol the cold boundary where light dies. And on land, in places where the trees thin and the horizon opens, a giant moves with a confidence earned by dominance. Tyrannosaurus rex, not a monster from myth, but an apex predator built by time, dense muscle, crushing jaws, senses tuned to movement and vulnerability. A presence that shifts the behavior of everything that hears it, because even silence can be hunted. This world is not gentle, but it is balanced, and balance can feel like permanence, like the kind of order that cannot be broken, yet far beyond that blue sky, beyond any weather, beyond the moon's quiet pull. Something is already arriving, not evil, not angry, just inevitable. A fragment of ancient rock set on a trajectory long before any dinosaur takes its last breath. A traveler that has crossed the empty distances where nothing screams, where nothing warns, where motion itself is destiny. The planet continues its day unaware, turning beneath sunlight, tides rising and falling, life feeding and being fed, predators timing dawn patrols to the moments when shadows still hide them and dew still cools the ground. Herbivores stripping vegetation that has covered continents for millions of years, and, in the margins under roots, within burrows, along stream banks, small mammals live like secrets. Warm-blooded, quick, nervous, surviving not by power but by caution, carrying in their tiny bodies a future they cannot imagine. And then, high above, the first changes begin in the thin upper air, where the incoming object compresses atmosphere until it heats, until chemistry turns violent, until the sky itself becomes a furnace in front of it, and what is still a rock becomes a moving sun, a brightening point that does not belong, growing minute by minute into a blazing wound in the heavens. To anything that looks up, if anything does it, is not a star. It is a fireball with intent written by gravity, and as it descends, the air screams without sound. You can hear from the ground. The surface becomes incandescent. An luminous trail etches a line across the day. A line that means the planet has entered its final hours of the age of dinosaurs. It crosses the last distance faster than comprehension, racing at tens of kilometers per second. And in the final moments, the sky around it glows as if the atmosphere is being peeled back and ignited. And then it strikes into shallow seas near what we now call the Yucatan Peninsula, an impact so enormous that explosion becomes too small a word, because the ground does not crack. It behaves like fluid. The sea is lifted and vaporized, rock melts and rebounds. And for an instant, the world is brighter than day as energy bursts outward in all directions. The crater forms in seconds, vast and deep, and the shockwave an invisible wall of pressure rips across land and water, flattening forests, snapping trunks like matchsticks, turning coastlines into collapsing lines of foam and debris. And the heat that follows is not local, it is planetary, because the impact does not merely destroy where it lands, it launches Earth into a chain reaction. Material blasted into space arcs above the atmosphere and returns. And when it returns, it does not fall like normal rocket re-enters like a global meteor storm. Thousands upon thousands of fragments turning the sky into a raining curtain of fire, and as those fragments plummet, they heat the air itself, pushing temperatures upward until the surface begins to bake, until vegetation dries and ignites, until wildfires do not start in one place but everywhere at once. As if the planet has been wrapped in flame. Animals flee, but there is nowhere to outrun an atmosphere that is burning, nowhere to hide from heat that arrives like a tide. And even if you survive the first inferno, the sky is already changing ash, soot, pulverized rock, and chemicals thrown high into the stratosphere begin to spread around the globe, turning daylight into dusk, then into an early night, blotting out the sun behind a thickening veil. The world becomes dim and cold in a matter of days, and what the impact begins, climate finishes, with sunlight blocked, photosynthesis falters, plants weaken, and many die. And when plants die, the great herds built to eat constantly, to process vast quantities of vegetation run out of food, their ancient migration routes leading only to emptiness, their strength turning into exhaustion, their mass turning into a liability. Because size is not power in a starving world. Carcasses appear across plains and forests that are now blackened, and predators arrive, but hunting is different when the entire ecosystem is collapsing, because there is no next season of abundance coming, no green rebound, just scarcity deepening into famine. Even the king tea, Rex becomes a creature of desperation, moving through charred landscapes where the familiar cues of prey and habitat have vanished, where the smell of smoke sits in everything, where the wind carries not the scent of forests, but the bitter tang of ash and sulfur. In the oceans, the collapse is quieter, but just as lethal, because when light fades, plankton and algae struggle, and when the base of the food chain weakens, everything above it begins to fail. And in time, even the great marine predators disappear into silence, not in one dramatic instant, but in a brutal sequence of starvation and disruption. This is the part the movies rarely show. The extinction is not a single day for everyone. It is a wave that rolls forward through time, and for many species it is months, maybe years, of worsening conditions. A slow erasing. Yet extinction is never absolute, because life has always had contingency plans hidden in the shadows. Creatures that can burrow, creatures that can hibernate, creatures that can eat many things instead of one. Creatures that can reproduce quickly, creatures small enough to shelter under debris or inside riverbanks when fire and shock pass overhead. Insects persist in pockets. Amphibians survive where water remains. Birds endure as the last living dinosaurs in different forms. And mammals, those secretive survivors, make it through because they were already built for uncertainty, already living in the margins, already practicing survival as a lifestyle. And then, slowly, the sky begins to clear, not suddenly, but gradually, as dust settles and the sun returns as a pale coin behind thinning clouds and rain washes the ash into the soil, carrying chemistry and death into rivers that begin to run again. And in the cracked ground, dormant seeds and spores find enough light to try once more. The first green returns timidly: mosses, ferns, small hardy plants, followed by insects and then by the animals that feed on them, and the earth begins rebuilding. But it does not rebuild the same world, because the old world is gone. The age of giant dinosaurs ends not because it was weak, but because Earth itself changed the rules. What comes next is an era where intelligence, adaptability, and speed matter more than size, where mammals spread into niches left empty, where evolution accelerates into opportunity, where new ecosystems rise from the ashes of the old. And if you could stand above the planet in that time, watching centuries pass like seconds, you would see a world learning to breathe again, a wounded Earth refusing to stay silent, because this is what the planet does: collapse, recover, transform. The Chicxulub impact was not simply the end of dinosaurs, it was a turning point in the story of life, a reminder that even a world that feels perfectly balanced can be one cosmic event away from total reinvention, and that the history under our feet is not just ancient, it is personal. Because the absence of those giants is what made space for everything that followed, including us. So when we look up at the night sky today, at the quiet stars that seem so distant and harmless, remember that the universe is not separate from Earth's story. It is part of it. And in one terrible day, 66 million years ago, the sky changed the ground forever. And from that destruction, the future began. If you want more cinematic deep time stories like this moments, when the entire world turns a page, subscribe and stay with the channel. And disclaimer, this narration is an educational reconstruction based on current scientific research and widely accepted models of the Chicxulub impact and mass extinction, with certain sequences dramatized to help visualize events. Exact timings, local conditions, and animal behaviors may vary as new evidence emerges.